All right, well, welcome everybody to our first science. Sorry, this is my son. Our first science and art workshop. This, I'm sure you know by now, but just as a little bit more background info, this is part of our Chronicles of the Curious project launch. Greg, Pat, and I have been working over the past year to hone this idea for an animated series, storytelling series to feature people in STEM and STEAM careers, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And we are crowdfunding to raise money to make a pilot episode. So that's why we've just gone all over social media with our campaign and trying to drop excitement. And part of that effort was to make more engaging programming for everyone else out there. So this is one of those efforts. So today, Pat, our very own animator, is going to give you a demo that shows kind of behind the scenes work, what he does. That's all I should just introduce myself. My name is Taylor Peterson. I'm kind of the project manager of everything. I'll hand it over to Greg for logistics.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is fun. I always get a kick out of watching Pat open up his file and kind of animate in real time. So I think this is going to be, I'm going to pick up a few things, that's for sure. So I'm Greg Mercer. I'm one of the team members for the Chronicles as well. I play the role of art director. We're a small team of 3, so we kind of each play many different roles, but we kind of had to pick some semblance of a title. So that's the one I chose. And so it's really fun collaborating with Taylor and Pat. And just a quick note about logistics. I'm sure we've all at this point been in plenty of webinars, so we're familiar with the drill. But for this one, what we're going to do is we really want it to be interactive. And I think that in order to let Pat kind of get a rhythm, we're going to have you place your questions. We hope you have questions. You can just write them into the chat. So there's that chat icon at the bottom of your interface. So feel free to throw them in there. I'll strategically throw those questions to Pat when I see opportune moments to do so. But we also want to give you a chance towards the end, since we're a relatively intimate group, give you a chance to ask him some questions directly. So we'll try to save, a good 10, 15 minutes at the end, towards the end. We won't go over an hour. So yeah, if you have something you would like to ask him personally, you can feel free to save those. Otherwise, feel free to put them in the chat. And with that, I will kick it over to Pat Bradley.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Pat Bradley. My company is Spring Shoe Animation, and I do animation illustration. Worked with Greg and Taylor at the Field Museum, and we've done projects outside the Field Museum as well. I'm guessing this is going to take maybe like a half an hour to kind of go through. We're using Munir Virani's story that Greg has masterfully collected in an interview. And our idea for this whole project is to have scientists talk about what got them into science. And rather than a scientist like up on a pedestal talking about their expertise in something, this would be more of an intimate conversation. And ideally, hopefully in the future without COVID, Greg would actually be in person interviewing someone like in a coffee shop or something like that. But this is done over the phone. But we still managed to get an awesome story out of Munir. And he's such a great storyteller. So that makes my job pretty easy. So what I think I'm going to do is start with just a clip of audio that I'm working with. And this project's a little bit different because normally in an animation project that I do, I'm either handed a script or, working with a script writer and kind of finessing the language a little bit to make everything flow. And in this case, we're kind of just working with the audio. There's a little bit of editing we can do, but it's really, you're working with this sort of fixed piece. And actually prefer that because there's so many fun things you can do, and hopefully you'll see some of those. So I'll start with, I guess I need to do a screen share. And can everyone see this screen that says Munir's audio sample? Yes. Nod your head, yes. All right. All right, so I was going to start with just maybe 30 seconds of audio, just as a test. Let me know if you can hear this. Anyone hear that? Oh, shoot. All right, 1 second. I think I need to share sound. Let me try this. I should know this by now, right, Chris? Here we go. Can you hear this?
And literally, within seconds.
Okay. All right. I'll play like the first 30 seconds, and just close your eyes and imagine what's happening, and how this might look visually.
And we get in his car, and he throws out a trap, and literally, within seconds, this bird falls on the trap. He spins the car around, and he goes, all right, grab onto the wheel. And I'm sitting on the passenger side. He opens the door. He dives out, and it does like a somersault, grabs this bird. Suddenly I realize I have to do something to stop the car. I stop the car. I get out of the car. I walk to him. He's holding this beautiful bird with a white chest and the most incredible red tail. And he says, hold this. This is the...
I'll just stop it there for now. So I'll just give you an idea of how I go about storyboarding something. And it starts, in this case, it starts with that. And let's see. And just a little background about storyboarding. Storyboards, in the way that I'm using them, they're not really meant to be beautiful. They're more functional in terms of their main function is just to be able to tell the story. And at this point, we haven't figured out exactly what Munir is going to look like, his character design, or Simon, the other guy in the car. Don't know what kind of car they actually drove, or even, honestly, what side the passenger side would be. All that stuff we'll figure that out afterwards. But right now, we're just trying to figure out how the story is going to work, like the basic visuals. And so I'm going to just take like a section at a time and play it through and show you kind of why I came up with these decisions. So the first section.
And we get in his car, and he throws out a trap, and literally...
All right, so there's the first section. And it's kind of interesting with this format of Munir telling the story. He's such a great storyteller, but it's sort of, I'm guessing in real life, factually, he would have probably set the trap and then gotten in the car and drove away. But because he says it the way he does, we can kind of have fun with that. And gets in the car, and he's throwing this trap just out, and it's a fun thing. I have no idea what the bird trap actually looks like. Again, that's why these storyboards are so rough. We'll figure that out later. But storyboards, you want to be able to throw them away. If something's not working, you don't want to be attached to them. And I think a lot of people see storyboards in books, or if you Google storyboards, there's some beautiful ones out there. And a lot of times those are ones that have survived multiple revisions, and each time they get a little bit more refined. And by the time you're going to put them in a book, they look beautiful. Or if you're working in an ad agency and they're doing a 30-second commercial and spending $100,000 on it, those are more like presentation boards that you would show a client, and those are going to be beautiful. This, and especially because it's Taylor, Greg, and I, there's a lot of trust there. So these things are pretty loose. So the next little sequence.
And literally, within seconds, this bird falls on the trap. He spins the car around.
So I just wanted to take this section. It's kind of a closer shot of Munir, and Simon is still in the shadows. And I kind of wanted to establish that Simon is focused. He's like the experienced. He's done this 1,000 times. Munir is very green at this point in his career, so he's holding onto his hat. He's like grasping the car. He's like a deer in the headlight. So I wanted to get that across in this shot. And he says he turned the car around, and I didn't really want to show that for partly because it's so quick. So we're doing kind of a bit of a Looney Tunes thing where they're going off screen to the right and then coming back, having turned the car around from right to left. And it's a little bit of a cheat, but it's kind of a fun way to do that. So it'll look a little smoother in the next version of this, but.
And literally, within seconds, this bird falls on the trap. He spins the car around.
Yeah, and you're supposed to see that coming out from off screen. And then here's the next.
And he goes, all right, grab onto the wheel. And I'm sitting on the passenger side. He opens the door. He dives out and it does like a somersault.
So this shot, it's him. We changed the point of view to sort of a front point of view. And the reason for that is for clarity, really. I mean, for one, it's more interesting to change things up every once in a while. But if we were to take this shot and show him jumping out of the car, let's see if I can do this. If he were jumping out, he'd either, depending on which side the passenger side is, he would either be jumping out this way, like behind, and be kind of covered up by the car, or he'd be jumping, forward, diving out this way. And if you look at that as, in animation, we talk a lot about silhouette and having a clear silhouette. I might just talk about just clarity in animation is so important, just because as a viewer, everything that's in an animation is meant to be there. It's been created by hand, even if it's computer animation, like someone has put that in there. So everything in there has a purpose. So you can get away with things kind of being a little more, I guess, loose, or things that wouldn't be distracting in live action if you have people in the background doing things in the distance or something. In animation, if someone's doing something or something's grabbing your attention, it's got to be part of that story. Sorry, that's a tangent, but so clarity for this is we have the silhouette, and if we had, let me just be really crude here. If we had a silhouette that was like him jumping out of the car and it looked something like that, you can't tell what that is supposed to be. So changing the camera view to this angle, that's fairly clear what's happening there. So that's part of the reason for that. This next scene.
It's like a somersault. Grabs the...
Yeah, in this case, I think the minimum amount of drawings I could do that is 4 to show him doing a somersault. So I'll actually take this scene and show you how this one is actually taken to the next level of animation in a little bit. And so going back to here.
This bird, suddenly I realize I have to do something to stop the car. I stop the car, I get out of the car, I walk to him,
So, it's the same scene as before without Simon in the car. And you can see how loose I am because I forgot to even add the tone gray color to Munir here in this frame. But I love this idea of when it's finally animated, the car would be kind of, shaking here. The steering wheel is kind of going out on his own. He's just panicked. I think that's going to be so great. So he stops the car, he gets out, the door's already open. And then we have like a real change in mood because, again, Munir is such a great storyteller. He kind of goes from this like action adventure scene to this like very like sort of heartfelt, intimate, emotional scene. So if you look at this here, these are all the scenes in that amount of time. And we look over here and the scenes are much longer. And that's kind of some of the art of cutting things. Like some of the basics of, action sequences usually have a lot of cuts in them. Like commercials have tons and tons of different scenes in them. And so this is, I think, a nice contrast to have something that's kind of fast paced, lots of cuts, and then to have this very different feel right next to it. And these, this just indicates, you'll see these a lot in storyboards, of the framing, like the camera would be zooming in at this point. So from here, I'll take it to an animatic, which, let me just jump over there. Greg Taylor, how am I doing for time, or any questions, or camera's up here?
Yeah, you're doing great time-wise.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think just keep rolling. I think people are letting you just roll.
Okay, let me
So
roll.
I'll be interjecting in here. Actually,
Okay.
yeah, I'll let you go on, and then I'll start interjecting. And if any questions come through, I will certainly throw
Okay.
those at you as well.
All right, cool. So from here, the difference between an animatic and a storyboard, like an animatic is basically just a moving storyboard where we take the camera, we can play with the camera, and a storyboard, you can send it out as a PDF and someone can read a storyboard. Animatic is actually going to be played in real time. So I think I'll just play this through and you can get a sense of, since, we saw the whole thing in chunks, let's just watch the whole thing here with some camera movement and some basic, like, Gumby style of just sliding pictures across.
And we get in his car and he throws out a trap, and literally, within seconds, this bird falls on the trap. He spins the car around and he goes, all right, grab onto the wheel. And I'm sitting on the passenger side. He opens the door, he dives out and it does like a somersault, grabs this bird. Suddenly I realize I have to do something to stop the car. I stop the car, I get out of the car, I walk to him. He's holding this beautiful bird with a white chest and the most incredible red tail. And he says, hold this. This is the first time I've ever held a wild bird, a bird of prey in my hand. And I'm holding it, and it's just like holding a baby. It was super calm.
I'll just stop it there. So you can kind of get the sense of, like, the camera here is doing a lot of the work of just kind of focusing your attention to what's going on. I'm trying to think of anything else that's interesting in these parts. I think for something like this shot here,
seconds, this bird falls.
We're not actually seeing the bird being trapped. We're just gonna hear the squawk. We'll probably add some sound effects in there, and I don't know. That's just jumping out at me at the moment.
Yeah, Pat, I think that's always interesting when we're looking at your storyboards. Sometimes you have words written on the drawing. Can you talk about, like, why do you do that and when do you choose to do that?
Well, for this project, it seemed like, and again, this is still really loose at this point. We haven't really sat down and discussed this in any kind of detail, but things like hold this, that seemed, I kind of like the text just kind of coming out with him saying it. But again, that's just something I can throw out and throw in the storyboard at this phase, and we can discuss, like, what's the best way to do this. But I think there's other times in animation that I can talk about some of those things. Maybe we should move over there. I'm going to jump over to this scene.
Pat, while you're transitioning, we've got some good questions starting to come in. One, this could get you off on a tangent, but how do you learn?
Unless you can get me back on.
Okay, yeah, I'll get you back to animation.
All right.
I mean, you make this look easy. So one question is, how do you learn all this?
Okay. I kind of started. So, I mean, long story short is I went to art school. I've been drawing all my life. But in terms of animation, I was working at the Field Museum and kind of discovered an animation program and just started messing with it. I mean, I'd always done video and video editing and tried, I think, Flash and Director and all these different programs that have come. And I think it was like a combination of having the technology of being able to draw right on the screen and, software being affordable. That's kind of what got me into it. And then once I really fell in love with it and was having literal like dreams about it every night. Then I decided, I learned as much as I could teach myself. And then I did an online program called Animation Mentor, which you learn from people who are at the top of their game. They're working at Disney and they're working at DreamWorks and Pixar. And that was a great way to learn because I didn't have to go to California. And I think a lot of those programs are meant to train people to get into feature film, which is its own thing. And it just worked out where I was in museums and could do this and discovered a need there that we didn't have. Like at the Field Museum, we were working on the dinosaur hall, the evolving planet, and there was no way to go out and videotape dinosaurs or like a lot of things that we wanted to discuss. So animating seemed like a no-brainer. So it was just partly a right place at the right time. But I can add, we were going to do a handout of software. What else is going to go on that handout? Just some recommended reading, YouTube channels. I'm going to put together a list of things. If this is something you're really interested in, storyboarding or animation or both, I'll send a list of things to check out, and my email and everything about this project will be on there. So feel free to ask me questions after this as well.
Thanks for letting us take you on that tangent. One more quick one that a couple people have actually is, do you start out drawing on paper? Do you sketch on paper before you go into the storyboard program, or do you work all digitally?
These days, I do everything digitally. It's so much quicker. It's kind of a strange thing just because before COVID, I was getting back into figure drawing and would go to local figure drawing classes, and getting back to pencil on paper was really cool. But I also I'm so comfortable doing things digitally now that it was kind of a hard transition back. So the technology is so nice now. You can get an iPad with a pen, and it feels it'll never feel the same as paper. Maybe it will at some point, but right now, it doesn't feel the same as paper, but it also has a lot of advantages, and a lot of that is just the efficiency of. When I first started, I was drawing and scanning in the drawings and coloring them and doing it that way. And it's definitely much more efficient to do it digitally.
Cool. Thanks for that. We'll let you keep rolling into the animation.
You know how my brain works. All right. So I'll take that scene. So I brought that scene into, this is same company, Toon Boom, that makes this software. This is their animation software. Looks very similar to the storyboarding software. I think this is exactly, 48 frames. This is 2 seconds of animation, and I will just play through. This is the scene, so we know.
Like a somersault, grabs this, like a somersault, grabs this, like a somersault.
All right, we'll turn off the audio. So that's what we're working with. And right now for the storyboard, it was 4 drawings. And so that's, I kind of had these, I made these so that kind of get a sequence of how I go about it. So here's the 4 drawings, and then we have in between drawings, and I just put that there for my own sake. So those are the in-betweens between their drawings, between the 2 drawings, in between drawings. And we have this. This is the equivalent of when you saw animators in the old days, and some still do it. I've done it a little bit, and I have a huge respect for the people who do this. But they, the flipping back and forth of people doing paper animation, and the paper was pretty translucent, I guess, not quite tracing paper, but this is what you would see. And in the software, you're lucky enough that you can see they color it, like the red is the previous drawing, the green is the next drawing, and you have to figure out what is going to go, what's the in-between drawing. And if I were doing this, I would do something established, like this is where his hands are going to go, and kind of get just, it's really nice to work as loosely as you can, I guess, with the idea that you're going to refine it later. So doing something like that, and so then you have, I won't go through this a whole bunch, but you have a drawing in between, and you would do the same thing here, like what's the drawing going to be between these 2? And this one's a little bit more difficult because you have, I might start with, all right, his hands have to go somewhere between there and there, and it's not going to be this straight line. A lot of movement works in arcs. I can talk a little bit about that. And his head is somewhere, between this drawing and this drawing. So we figure that stuff out in the same between this one and this one. This one's a little bit easier, but again, it's like an arc here that you're trying to establish. Well, no, that's not even right. It'd be like an arc here because like maybe shoulder to shoulder, and you kind of just rough stuff in there and figure out his hands are probably going to be somewhere, his arms, are probably be somewhere like here. And this is when you would see them flipping back and forth. That's what they're figuring out. Is that close? How clunky is that? And you just keep refining. So the next stage, maybe it looks like, I can make this a little bit bigger. So you have something like that. Still really rough. And yeah, if I play that through just with the timing right now, it's going to look really weird. Just because these drawings aren't spaced out. So,
Pat, do you ever get up and act something out before you draw it, like something like this?
I do, yeah. A lot of the times, like when I was doing the Animation Mentor program, and if you're, this is not the most refined animation in the world, like what I do, but if you're doing something like feature film, a lot of times you'll shoot video reference, and it's incredibly helpful. And that's something they teach you, is partly like physical acting. I remember when I was doing that, like actually going down to the gymnasium part of the Field Museum where they had all the mats and the mirrors, and recording myself jumping over an exercise ball for one of the things, and for one of the exercises we had to do, one of the animation exercises, and videotaping that, and you kind of study the movement, and it's really helpful. And also just in terms of acting, I'm not a great actor by any means, but if you record yourself, if you have a scene that's dialogue, I'm using a lot of hand gestures right now, stuff like that, that if if you're just sitting there drawing, you're not going to really pick up on, and a lot of stuff you're not aware of until you videotape yourself. And another thing about animation that once you kind of get into it, you start to notice things. It becomes kind of consuming in a way. Like you'll notice walks. Like walks are a big thing where everyone has a very unique walk, and a lot of the times you'll be at the park or whatever, or just checking people out. You're not, it's not checking them out, but like you're just checking out their walk, and just people who have a lot of weight, just the way they shift their bodies in different ways. It can become really consuming. So I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent again, but yes, definitely. I don't do it enough, but it's really helpful to study yourself, and if you can get other people, that's even better. So let's see, we're on this one here. So this one gives you an idea of something that didn't really work out. So there's two things that didn't work out. There's this, I thought I had it. 1 second. There's this, sorry. What am I looking at? All right, here we go. This shot here, I wanted to have his arms kind of ready to grab the cage out to the side, because that seems like that would be the right thing to do. But that didn't work out. And that's, just to get a little bit technical, that's an anticipation. Like that's a big part of animation, is anticipating something instead of, if I was going to throw a punch, always use that as an example. If I was going to throw a punch and I just went from, can everyone see me over here? If I went from this pose just to that pose, it's not as clear as doing something where you're pulling back, and everyone knows it. Baseball pitcher is a better example where, I should probably stop the screen share for a sec. Baseball player is a better example where if you do a pitch and you just go from here to when you're letting go of the ball, is not nearly as clear, because it's this kind of action, as this. I'll try to do this. Like actual wind up is so much more important to the animation, because it's telling you what's about to happen. And so that's a big part. Let's see if we can get back to this. That's a big part of animation, is anticipation. And this is probably not the best example, since I decided it wasn't working later on. I'm going to just play this one through so we know where we're at. So boom. And there's another thing that happened. I'll go back to anticipation in a moment, but this hat thing that's happening, I thought it would be cool to have his hat somehow fly off and land back on his head. But I realized kind of later that I was trying to force something to happen that wasn't working. I tried this version where I take a hat and put that on a different layer. I don't know if you can see it here. This is the hat layer. And I was just trying to, it just doesn't make sense physically that his hat would, if he did a double somersault where he was just kind of spinning around, his hat flew up here and then landed back on his head, that might work. But the way this is right now, well, doesn't really make sense. And it's one of those things where I wanted it to work so bad, and eventually I was like, I had to let it go. And one other thing that's happening in this version is I'm using a peg. I'm making that first drawing sort of slide on its own, which instead of just going from this straight to that, it's floating in and giving some free movement there. And then I think this one is the final rough that I came up with before cleaning things up. So it's like that. I can talk just a tiny bit about the arcs again. This is really helpful when figuring out these arcs that happen between the drawings. So if we go to this view and see, like I like to use the hands as examples, or the feet. These hands are kind of making a little bit of that arc movement. They start, that helps you kind of figure out the shape of the hands. Hands probably don't do that in real life, but if you look at film or something, sometimes there's a blur, a camera blur, where the hand or a limb or something moving fast is going to show that arc more exaggerated. So, like, maybe a better example here. Like, these hands are kind of doing this exaggerated, your fingers aren't going to bend like that in real life, but it helps when you're seeing it very quickly. It helps with that motion of establishing, these arches that happen, these arcs. And then, so this was in the previous version, I had this shot of him like reaching out to the side to grab the cage, and I decided that wasn't working. It worked better just to have this continuous movement here where he's kind of doing that. And then finally, here's a cleaned up line version that looks like that. And I kept some of the rough stuff in there. And just going frame by frame, there was one thing I wanted to show here. I think this might, what's that?
I was going to say there's some comments about how cool it is to see the way the coat moves and the way the hat moves, like those little details people are really picking up on.
Great, thank you. I think, Greg, what you might have been talking about, like what you see in some of my stuff is like things like little notes, especially if I'm doing lip syncing. I'll sometimes have, like, I'll put whatever syllable or consonant the person's saying, I'll have that written out there in the rough versions. In this, I have these notes, and you'll see a lot of these notes, especially if you're in a studio where a studio bigger than mine, where it's more than one person, where you're sharing some of the responsibilities. You'll include notes that say, for this one, this leg isn't going to move in the final line, so it looks better if you actually just take this drawing and copy it. So you can see that in the final line version here, where this one it moves a little bit there, but there's a little bit of shift there, but it's basically just taking that drawing and copying it. It saves you time, and it looks better if something isn't flickering. Because if I draw a bunch of lines together, even if I use this and I try to make them, what am I doing? Worst demo ever. Where'd it go? All right, never mind. You hopefully get the idea that these two lines are never going to be the same. And unless that's a style that you're going for, where all the held drawings, you'll see that like it's kind of like a wobbly style of animation that's really cool. And the reason they do that is to keep some life in the lines when they're held. When you have a lot of, you'll see Yes? Okay. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong, but hopefully you get the idea that that wobble is just kind of give it kind of a rougher look, but it's basically just taking 3 drawings. You never do 2 because it'll flicker back and forth. Like if it's these 2 drawings, so seeing that back and forth, it'll look horrible if it's moving at 24 frames a second and you're just seeing this. So it's usually 3 drawings or more of the same drawing that gives you that. I wish I had a good example of it in front of me. I wasn't thinking of that. But all right, so finally we'll move on to the colored version here that looks like very much like Indiana Jones here. And I added, and kind of one of the nice things about this software and a lot of digital software that you couldn't do in the old days, like something like skin tone, if you can change that, as long as you've drawn that consistently through every drawing, now he's Incredible Hulk, but you can do that kind of stuff, and boom. So that's probably close to the final. I added, there's some smoke that I didn't get a chance. I did this last night. It was getting kind of late. So, and then this kind of rough background. And I'm kind of jumping the gun here because once again, we haven't established like the actual animation style or the character designs yet. So this is kind of jumping the gun a little bit. So there it is. I also,
sorry, I was
just gonna say that I would also like, I kind of liked how in the storyboard his face was very much shaded by the brim of his hat. So I think I would go back and add that. But yeah, that's pretty close. Oh yeah, one tiny thing is like add a little bit of camera movement in there. And I think that helps to just add a little bit more.
Cool.
And that's.
Sorry, Pat, I don't want to interrupt, but we're gonna, maybe it'll be fun to get into a Q&A here. I think, well, let's see. There's a couple questions in the chat that we could just go through quickly, and then we'd love to open it up if anybody would like to ask Pat a question. So Sarah would like to, your former colleague Sarah, our former colleague Sarah. We should note there's a lot of folks from Minneapolis here tonight that don't necessarily know each other, which is pretty cool. So Sarah wants to know, how many frames does a clip like this contain? You mentioned earlier the in-between drawing. And a somersault needing 4 drawings to be successful. So yeah.
Yeah, and I chose this drawing, this scene, because it had a fair amount of action in it. And so this is 48 frames, 2 seconds. The number of drawings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. About 17 drawings. And obviously, like there's with projects like ours, and just depending on the budget that people have, it's a little bit more limited only compared to like a feature film where they're going to use a lot closer to 24 frames or 24 drawings a second. And that's, it's a little more limited than a feature film, of course, but I think we also can have some really creative solutions to storytelling that, something that's, if we were given $1 million to make this thing, it would still, I don't know, it'd probably be designed by committee. It would be, just, there'd be too much, too much divided up in terms of the creativity. And I think having like the three of us and maybe a couple other people to bounce things off of, it keeps it a little bit more fresh. So I kind of love having the limitations in animation. My whole YouTube thing is about, it's called Tips and Cheats, because there's plenty of tutorials out there that will show you all the technical ways to make things perfect. And if you're going to animation school and you want to work for a big company, that's what you do. You try to make things as technically perfect as you can. And for something like this, I love the fact that it's a little more loose. We can have a little bit more fun. I don't know if that answers the question at all. Sorry.
Yeah, well, let's see. With the last 10 minutes here, would it, since we're a small group, is there anybody that would like to ask a question directly to Pat? You can feel free to unmute yourself. Sorry. I see my folks trying to unmute themselves, maybe.
Elliot just sent a chat.
Oh, Elliot sent a chat. Can you show a few seconds of a completed sequence from this one, or from a different animation?
No, from this one.
From this one. Well, I guess
I cannot, only because this is as far as we've gotten. We've done just storyboarding and doing the animatic section. And that's why we're trying to raise the funds to actually finish the whole project. And not from this one, not yet, but I think that's part of the cool thing about this project is, the people involved and people giving to the project are going to be very aware of all the steps of this as it progresses over the next few months. We'll be sending updates, and so hopefully fairly soon you'll see the entire animatic, you'll see the entire rough animation, and you'll see all the steps along the way that are involved.
Yeah, I should add there that Taylor and I have been working with you on this, and obviously you're only sort of working with a very small snippet of what's going to be probably a 4 to 5 minute story.
Yeah.
But Taylor, we're seeing some of this stuff for the first time. This is the first time we saw his coat and some things. So Pat, you guys are really seeing this happen almost in real time, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, this is less than 24 hours old. This I was working on it last night. So
yeah. Yeah. Anybody? Any other questions out there that anybody's been holding that they would like to ask Pat?
Did you start with almost a script for Munir, or did you just interview him and let him talk and then decide what you wanted to make the story out of?
That's a good one for you, Greg. You talk about this transcripting and everything.
Yeah, I mean the short story there. The way we like to work is this: we sort of, we'll find out about a very interesting storyteller that seems like they have potential, and in this particular case, what we did was, we reached out to somebody at this place, the Peregrine Fund in Boise, where I happen to live. They're just this incredible conservation organization. They work with birds of prey. They're doing a lot of, they originally started to bring the peregrine falcon back from the brink of extinction through breeding, conservation breeding on site. And then that was successful. And now I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the California Condor, which almost went extinct. And this place that Munir works for, they breed condors, and every year they release them into the wild in Arizona and California. And so we knew about this place. We got to be friendly with some people there, and we asked if they had anybody that they thought would be a good storyteller. They said, oh, you should talk to Munir. He's a great storyteller. He's got an interesting story. And so, sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying, Sarah, what we did was we knew that Munir was going to be a candidate. We did a little research to learn about his interests. He had some video. He had done a TED Talk, so he actually had a lot of stuff out there. We were able to learn a lot about him. He's really into vultures. He grew up in Africa. So we kind of knew some things about him. And then we treated it like an interview. And we, Pat Taylor and I kind of threw up questions around. We thought, what are some things we'd like to ask Munir? And we kind of went in with a list. And then I connected with Munir just to keep it easy, recorded the conversation. And then I just asked him questions, and really something that we think makes this idea for this series stand apart is that we don't want anything to be scripted, and we didn't ask him to say anything twice. There was a lot of pressure just to kind of say, it wasn't pressure, but it was like a conversation. I mean, we wanted it to feel like if we're sitting at a coffee shop talking to him, just a very approachable story, something that he would share with a friend of his, or if he's in a classroom talking to some students, the way he would talk to them. So we wanted it to feel really natural, so that he'd be approachable and just really be human and really connect with audiences. So that's how this went for this one. And it also meant that sometimes the take isn't perfect, but again, sometimes that revealed some opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear a little bit like microphone scraping. And I think there were some other little technical things. And we also transcripted the whole thing and read through, Greg Taylor and I, and kind of highlighted parts that we thought, all right, maybe we can connect this with this, or, and I think we had two or three different parts of the story he was telling. We're really struggling to figure out which one was going to work the best. And we landed on this one. And I think it was partly because it has that sort of action adventure section and this really heartfelt moment. So that was part of the reasoning there.
It's kind of nice that there are three of us, because we literally had to vote on which part of, talk to him for an hour. And out of an hour, we only are going to need 3 minutes of that. So Pat Taylor and I were like, we were voting on which part of the story we thought was the most compelling. And it's great that there are three of us, so we wouldn't get stuck. We got a good question, which is, how do you animate lip syncing?
Ooh.
From the Warner family. Thanks, Warners, for tuning in.
There's a whole sort of art to that. So what you do is, in the old days, you had something called an X sheet, where they would time out the dialogue, and it'd be someone's job just to figure out, all right, the Chronicles of the Curious, someone says that, and they would hear the k and the R and the S, and kind of figure out, based on 24 frames a second, where that's going to lie. And so the animator would have the X sheet and make mouth shapes based on that. And nowadays I'm able to scrub through the audio. It's so wonderful to have, like, you have the audio right in your project, and you can scrub through it and figure out someone's making an S sound here. An S shape shows a lot of teeth. If someone's, an O sound is all really big, and you try to exaggerate those. I'd have to say, like, lip syncing is one of the things that I'm still working on. It's not a strong point of mine, but it's something that you do those things, you make those different mouth shapes, and then you still have to listen back, because if you do something where you make everything line up perfectly with scrubbing through the timeline, it doesn't look right, because I think it takes a moment for your brain. It takes, I think, usually 2 frames. What is that? Like a 1/12 of a second for your brain to I don't know what it is, but if you slide everything back a couple frames, all of a sudden it makes sense. It starts to register. It's an interesting thing, but you study different mouth shapes, and it gives me an appreciation for people who read lips, because I've studied mouth shapes and I've tried to read lips, especially in situations where I can't hear. like at a bar or something where it's really noisy and I'm trying to read someone's lips. And I recognize certain shapes and what they should be, but like that shape right there could be, in my mind, an F, like someone's, or it could be an S or a K, or a K. You know, there's all these different shapes that, all these different sounds that one shape can make. So, yeah, it's just something you study and, like I say, animation can be just hugely a lifelong pursuit in terms of all the things there are to learn about it, because you're studying movement and life and acting and drawing and every other thing. So
That's a good segue into another question that Eva Bradley, someone you probably
Eva, yeah,
Eva.
Hey,
She
Eva.
Eva wants to know what animator or even artist has had the greatest influence on your style.
I would have to say the first one that comes to mind is this guy, Michael Dedukdevit. He must be from Holland or something. If you look up father and daughter animation from probably the 90s, oh, it's so good. And everything he does, he actually, in some of his animations, he inks with an actual brush, like not pen and ink, but brush and ink. There's like the monk and the fish. Uh, he's my hero. He's one of my heroes. And then like on the other extremes, like, you know, Chuck Jones does all the Looney Tune stuff, and, you know, he's amazing.
Maybe we could include a link or two for folks in the follow.
Oh yeah, I'll do that.
That we send them. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, we just watched from people who made The Secret of Kells, Wolfwalkers just came out. So good.
That studio is brilliant.
Yeah, just the drawings. I mean, if you took a still, you could freeze it, because when we were watching, I was showing the kids. You can watch that, and our internet was glitchy, and it would just freeze every once in a while. And I was like, look at that frame. It's beautiful. You know, it like every time it froze, it was like just a painting right there.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can tell I'm geeking out.
Yeah, this could go on for hours, people.
Yeah, I won't be offended if people walk away at this point.
Yeah, no. I mean, we are at we're at 1 hour, which is what we promised folks. So we don't want to keep anybody past that.
Yeah.
I suppose if anybody wants to hang out,
I'm happy to hang out for as long as anyone wants to, but don't feel free.
Well, thanks for sharing your time, Pat.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks everyone for your time too. This was great to see all your faces and feel like we're together.
Yes.